I'll let Mr. Carroll answer that question.
Mr. Popowitz, are you talking about the next accession of permit applications that we do, or actual development of the site?
Actual development of the site. What was the process you guys are going to follow for digging and then reclamation?
Okay. Try to walk you through, if you remember the map that showed the plant site and then the natural progression around the site. As Mr. Payne and Mr. Fincham had explained in there previously, we do have one area that we will bring in our equipment again in an effort to keep, by barge, again, to keep material off the area highways. We would actually set up that plant equipment at that location. We'll go in to build the berms and the other landscaping aspects that you see on the plans that we have submitted. We would then begin to excavate the topsoil, which we will stockpile, keep for future reclamation work. Then we would start the first excavation and create that initial excavation. That material would go to the plant site, would be processed. Again, it's a wet process, no additives to it. You basically are, it's like a sieve. You're sorting sand according to its size. That would go in a stockpile. That material would be loaded out onto a barge through a telescoping conveyor that would go out, load the barge, that would come back to reduce any visual that you would see along the riverside. I think you've seen the pictures of that previously. And that would be a natural progression as you develop around the site. Once you go into the next area, you know, again, it is, you know, from an economic standpoint, we only want to move that dirt one time. And we're going to move it in advance of that, put it into berms, and then stockpile the topsoil. And as we move around the site, we'll be doing concurrent reclamation behind us. So that topsoil, as it comes off the next area, will go around to the area behind, so that you're seeding and have reclamation work being done concurrent around the edges of that pond. In the agricultural areas, essentially what you end up with a better soil profile, because the topsoil that was originally on that 145-acre lake is going to be saved and put back on the remaining agricultural areas. And I think that was where Dr. Lee Daniels has done the work looking at our previous sites and showed that those were actually as productive or more productive than similar sites, agricultural areas in those counties. And he quite frankly said it's some of the best reclamation work that he's seen, and he's one of the preeminent experts here in Virginia, out of Virginia Tech. So it's that natural, sequential effort. It's not, gee, let's open up 372 acres and we're going to do all the reclamation work at the end. That's not how it works. That's not a good business plan. It's not the efficient use of your people and your equipment on the site. And it keeps us concurrent with that mining process and back behind you. So did that help?
Yes.
Okay.
I do have another question for you.
Yes, sir.
Could you speak to some of the community work that Vulcan has done in the past? And more recently, the Stafford schools, I think, recognize you for some of your work.
Yes, sir. And it's been some of the extensive materials that we had submitted. We have about 60-plus adopt-a-school partnerships in our footprint in Mideast Division. We do 9,000-plus school tours in our footprint. We've got a charitable foundation. The three sort of bullet points of our charitable work and involvement are adopt-a-school programs, or science, and environmental education. And the third stool in that for us is employee involvement. And that's one of the things that you'll see from the examples of the stewardship that we have provided to you. It's always got our people involved, whether they're mentoring in school systems, providing tours, being involved in, as you saw with some of the environmental enhancement projects, whether it's on the James River with the wetland restoration, or it's Hale Cove, or other places in Maryland where we've done similar works in establishing wetland vegetation on major riverine systems. It always involves our people. And that's one of the things we think that makes us different, and that our folks take a very intense involvement personally in the community in which they operate. They live there, they work there.
I'm more familiar with the wildlife refuge over in Rockingham County. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, sir. Back number of years ago, Vulcan was actually one of the founding members of the Wildlife Habitat Council, and since that time, we've got over 40 sites in the nation that are certified, and these are not just once certified, always certified. You have independent biologists that come in, they look at the site, they work with you on developing habitat enhancements for indigenous wildlife in there. They come back and make sure that you're doing the things that you do. You're certified every 2, maybe 3 years if you've got a really good track record, but that's a kind of recurring recertification process. In addition to that, we also have what they refer to as corporate lands for learning sites. That's where we do further enhancement with our school partners, and oftentimes are our adjacent neighbors. At a Manassas facility in Northern Virginia, we actually share a common boundary with 2 schools. And I think you saw a picture at the end of the last presentation that shows one of our ponds there that is actually an outdoor habitat and education facility. And we've got numerous examples of that. I think you also saw something with the at our puddle dock operation down in Prince George, where we work with the Friends of the Lower Appomattox River Association in establishing access to Riverine Park for handicap access, and our folks were also involved in building part of the pier structures there. So, you know, that's the type of involvement. Most of our folks, we basically kind of refer to it as every day's Earth Day for us. We're out there working in mineral resources. We've got an obligation to make people understand that mineral resource development and protection and enhancement of the environment are not mutually exclusive. These are things that can coexist if done in a proper and safe fashion. And quite candidly, that's, back to your questions, Mr. Underwood, that's what is our motivation. And so that we can make sure that we have the ability to continue to operate in this business. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Fincham? In the studies that Vulcan has submitted to you, obviously there's been extensive information given to you, and I guess most of the data has been substantiated. Other than some of the comments made at some of the public hearings, have you seen anything submitted to you that refutes the findings with Vulcan's materials as far as any health issues or environmental issues? Have you seen any other material that refutes those types of things?
Mr. Popowitz, we reviewed the file with the county attorney's office, and I think collectively we felt that the materials that have been submitted by the applicant addressed many of the issues that were raised. Certainly materials from other individuals have been submitted as well, which would be argued that those materials refute the findings or the studies of the applicant. And I think in part that's what makes it a debatable issue. You have information that's been submitted from both sides.
Mr. Fincham.
Let Mr. Popowitz finish. And then
Yes. I'll finish with a statement. I'm going to finish with a statement.
Can you, I take it your statement is going to be one way or the other with regard to the project?
Probably yes.
Okay. Let Mr. Seeley ask his question, and we'll go right back to your statement, and you'll have the floor.
Thank you.
In that vein, the Planning Commission turned down the special exception.
Yes, sir. They recommended denial. Yes,
Recommended denial. We'll go with that. So they obviously saw something in this project, in this process, that they didn't believe was good. Can you tell us what that was?
I believe if I recall correctly, and I believe it's in the materials that were previously provided to the board, the concern stated in the motion of the Planning Commission, if I recall correctly, and I'm speaking from memory, was a concern out of the character of the area with respect to both the existing uses of the area as well as the potential uses in the area, i.e. the future development of Haymount. I believe they also referenced, for example, noise, scenic impacts, etc., and I believe the statement was made that while that they could not be totally mitigated. And I believe, if I recall correctly, that was the genesis of the comments from Mr. Brown in making his motion.
Mr. Pompowitz?
Yes, sir. I have no more questions for you, Mr. Fincham. In my time here, one of the things that I've always tried to look at is property rights. People have rights to do what they wish with their property to a certain extent as long as it doesn't harm anybody. Obviously, we have laws that prevent people from harming others. And also, we have special exceptions based on the character and the laws and the reputation of those who are asking for that special exception. Mr. Chairman, the applicant has submitted extensive documentation to address the questions and the issues that have been raised concerning this application. I believe the applicant has more than satisfactorily addressed those issues. The issues of monetary and environmental. Furthermore, the applicant's commitment to permanently conserving the property is consistent with the goal of permanently protecting the Rappahannock River corridor. And a goal that many in opposition to this request have raised. And finally, the applicant has worked with us in an effort to address the long-term water supply needs of the county. Not that we have to take them up on that issue. We did ask them to look at that, and we have first right of refusal. That was brought up earlier, but we're working on that plan now. And if it's found that that won't be a viable source, then we won't use that as part of our plan. But at least the option is there. And I think that in any county that's doing due diligence with respect to water and sewer and those things, due diligence needs to be done, and that's part of this application, that this applicant wants to be part of that. Based on all the information that's been provided to date, I'm of the position that the use will not be detrimental to the character and development of the adjacent property, and is consistent with the purpose and the intent of the zoning ordinance, the comprehensive plan, and I believe the approval of this request is warranted for the reasons I've stated. And so I make a motion that we accept Special Exception 03-2010 for Black Marsh Farms Incorporated, and that it be approved subject to the amended conditions.
Mr. Chairman, I would second that motion, but also I would like to have a few words, please.
I figured everyone would like to make a statement, so that's why we saved them for last.
This application certainly was one that had a lot of controversy with it. There are good and bad points on both sides, and it's probably one that I have spent as much time on researching and looking at as any major project. This Haymount was one that comes to mind, and that was one that I did not support, but at least it was a process that I took to try to find out all the information that I could about Haymount and what it would mean to Caroline County. I've certainly verified through the Commissioner of Revenue's office. I've talked to her on several occasions. I've spoken to Mike Fincham on many occasions. I did not see any reason for me to come tonight and to try to ask the questions publicly when I could find the answers by reading the research, by reading the paperwork that we were given. I can tell you this is only a small portion of what we've received over the last 3 weeks to review. And I have taken a great deal of time to review what has been presented and confirmed pretty much what is being said. It concerned me that some people came before this board and talked about the revenue stream as to how little it would be and how the applicant had misled or tried to mislead the board on the amount of revenue that was going to be coming in. Once I talked with the Commission of Revenue and found out that they had come to her to get the as to how she would arrive at numbers and taxing information, and confirmed that they had come and used the numbers correctly. Then I feel like that the $104,000 is a reasonable number that we can look at as far as Caroline County is concerned. One of the Planning Commission said to me one day that, and I also talked with the chairman of the Planning Commission, which happens to be the member of the Planning Commission that represents the district I represent. And we discussed this in great deal as well. But one of the other commissioners, Planning Commission said to me one day that they were voting against this because they'd had 45 people to speak against this project and no one to speak in favor of this project. And that was the reason they were voting against the project. I personally don't see that's a reason to vote against a project that impacts the county the way this is going to impact it, as far as monetary, as well as continuing to protect the environment in that area. Therefore, I support Black Marsh, the project, strictly because I believe it's going to be good for Caroline County. There's not going to be transportation issues on the road, which we've heard a great deal about. And I just see nothing to vote against here, to be quite honest with you. I see no reason to vote against this project.
Mr. Seeley, would you like to make a statement?
Yes, I would, Mr. Chairman. This report is really, I think, a disservice to all those folks in Western Carolina who are currently on water restrictions, and to every business owner in the growth area in need of potable water. What is in fact the true ability of us to use water from the river is a trump card which enables us to make a deal with Spotsylvania and others for long-term water in exchange for short-term buy for the county to alleviate the water crisis we presently face in Ladysmith and Carmel Church. We are about to bargain away the trump card for a mine which King George has already reported will be giving us less than $7,000 a year in revenue, and in the past has caused problems for others around those mines. The $100,000 a year which Vulcan claims they will bring is simply that claim, which they cannot substantiate or even have not been able to through this discussion. It might as well be $500,000 at this point. We've had promises before that have not come through many times here. This is not a good business encounter. In fact, it's counterproductive. The holding pond will never, at any time, be conducive to a reservoir site due to the elevation of the site and the heavy nutrients which will remain. Not to mention the right-of-ways that will need to be purchased to bring water from this site to any other site that we'll have to take it to. It will simply be too expensive for riverfront property to be bought and then used as a right-of-way for water. I have received hundreds of letters concerning the mine. The majority of the mine letters were either from non-residents or those with a vested monetary interest in the outcome of where the residents and the residents from Ladysmith do not understand the effect this will have on their future water supply. The majority of the letters against the project were from regular citizens, residents, some of whom in their 90s took the time to sign a letter but wrote real letters about their objections to the project. The most profound letters were against the mine were from well-known archaeologists and the chief of the Rappahannock Indians and 2 doctors who said the impact to their actual dwelling site would prevent them from bringing their 2 doctors' practices to Caroline County. Lastly, the project violates and makes a mockery of our comprehensive plan and was turned down by the Planning Commission, and I think that should speak volumes to all of us.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Underwood, would you like to make a statement?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I've had a chance to read probably 99% of the material. For me, it comes down to the rights of Mr. Balkmeister to use this property in a legal manner to gainful revenue for himself versus the neighboring community, neighbors in the community who simply really say, I don't want it here. I've heard about silicosis, and I've kind of did a little research, and if that's the case, we should close down every beach across America. You all go every year. That's nonsense. I look at Mr. Volkmeister. I believe in his character. I talked to Mr. Carroll. I believe in what you say. I believe in what you're going to do. So I'm going to go along with you. I'm going to give you my approval.
Obviously, I can count, but I guess it would be time for at least my statement. And to be quite honest, I came to this board meeting and I wasn't sure how I was going to vote. I wanted to make sure we got all the questions answered. I do look at Vulcan, and I did a little research, aside from the thousands of letters and cards I got. I did get some cards, or I did get a letter from a supervisor or county commissioner, as they're called in Maryland, that said what a good neighbor Vulcan had been and all the things they did in the schools. And I do believe you're a good company. And I think if this project is approved, you'll probably be a good neighbor in the county. And I expect you to do all those things you said you would do, such as the school projects and adopt the schools and things of that nature. I've known Mr. Wachmeister, or known of Mr. Wachmeister, for 20 years. I met Mr. Wachmeister when he stood in the courthouse at Caroline County telling me what a bad idea Haymount was. And Mr. Wachmeister was nowhere near as happy and smiling as he is today. But shortly after that, at I would guess say a more reasonable moment, Mr. Wachmeister and I talked, and he invited me over to his farm to get some vegetables, I believe. So I don't think I ever took him up on that offer, but I did wave to him a couple of times when I was going to Four Winds. And I do believe he's a good person, and I also don't think it's good for us to kind of stop people when they really have a way to kind of make ends meet. We're really discussing property rights. And some people will say that you have the right to do whatever you'd like to do on your own property. That's almost true. We do have zoning laws, and property rights kind of are like the right to free speech, at least in my opinion. You have as an American in a free society, you have the right to free speech. You have the right to say almost anything. But you can't yell fire in a crowded auditorium. So somewhere, not a legislative body, but somewhere decides where your rights actually stop. But I think this is really a case. I had somebody come up from Haymount and say it was a bad thing. But I've really given Haymount 20 years to do something, and if Haymount had come to fruition by now, we probably wouldn't even be considering this at all. But my main concern is, how can I stop the next one? And I think that's where I'm gonna draw my line in the proverbial sand and say that if I let this one go through, how can I stop the next one? So it's quite obvious how the board is going to vote, but that's the statement that I wanted to make. I will call the question, and there's no sense in voting orally. We'll go roll call. Mr. Underwood, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Popowitz, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Mr. Seeley, how do you vote?
Nay.
Mr. Akers, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I vote nay, so the motion carries 3-2. So that takes care of the Black Marsh issue. We will take another break to allow those in attendance to leave if they'd like to leave. Board will reconvene. We've done the county administrator's report. Closing board comments, Mr. Underwood.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say that the goal of this board, I'm hoping, is to make sure that we look down the road into the future to see what, and hopefully make decisions that will have positive impact on the county. There are going to be times when we don't see eye to eye about certain issues. But I'm hoping that we all can agree to disagree and continue to work hard to make the county the absolute best it can be.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood, and Mr. Akers and I have had that very conversation. We, at times, well, first of all, we all agree that we want Caroline to be better. At times, we disagree on how to make it better. But as long as we remember what we have in common, more than what we have as differences, we're going to achieve that goal. So I appreciate you reminding us again and allowing me to say that one more time. Mr. Popowitz, closing board comments.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Today, I have been asked on several occasions whether I'm going to run for Board of Supervisors again. And tonight, I'm going to officially announce that I will not be seeking re-election. When I first started this process, I had a few goals in mind, one of them being a water plan, which we have finished about 2/3 of, worked with emergency services to improve those, get some more money for those guys, and hopefully we've, even with the tough economic times, we have done that. Improve our economic development programming, and I think that that is probably the biggest thing that I wanted to try to accomplish, and I think we have done that in the last 4 years. We have improved our economic development process. Finally, to that end, I want to thank the constituents of Fort Royal District for their support, their help, their suggestions, and I know that I've had many people ask me if I was going to run, begging me to run, but for my own personal reasons, I've decided not to. But most of all, I think that I've accomplished the goals that I set out to do. And I told folks when I started this process that if I succeeded in getting those goals accomplished, that I would not be seeking a second term anyway. So with that, thank you all. And I'd like to thank this board. Many of you have been my allies, some of you not so much, but I think in the end, we have tried to do what is best and right by Caroline County, and I think that we're all better for it. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Popowitz, and I'm sure that the citizens of Port Royal and Caroline thank you for your service. Mr. Seeley, closing board comments?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Akers.
Mr. Chairman, no, it's in keeping in light of what Mr. Underwood has suggested and you've indicated tonight, I have no comments other than to say to Mr. Popowitz, we have many times not agreed on several issues, but I do appreciate the fact that we've been able to disagree agreeably, and neither one we've not taken it personal when we did disagree. And I think that is what it's all about, is the fact that we have tried to work together and get through our differences for what is best for Caroline County. And I wish you the very best in your future endeavors.
Thank you. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to be in politics. I'm just going to a different level of politics.
Just don't be a thorn in our side.
Like before?
I think he said any more. All right. Thank you again, all jokes aside. We do appreciate that. I don't have any closing board comments. I do have a closed meeting that we have to go through under Section 2.23711A7, consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff. So I don't have to say anything about that. And I also have Section 2.23711A1 personnel, which is the county administrator position. Consultation with legal staff to discuss specific legal matters requiring provision of legal advice by counsel involving the negotiation of contracts regarding the proposed, is that right? proposed recreational facility? Oh, okay, yes, that is right, that's not the one we didn't. So that's the motion we need in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Akers, second by Mr. Popowitz. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. We will be in closed meeting. Motion made by Mr. Akers, seconded by Mr. Popowitz to come out of closed session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Parton, you have 2 action items? Oh, we have to certify. Mr. Underwood,
I so certify.
Mr. Popowitz,
Also certified.
Mr. Seeley,
I so certify.
Mr.
I so
Akers,
certify.
and I so certify that only the things we went into closed session were discussed. So we have certified, and you have 2 action items.
Yes, the motion to approve the ground lease agreement.
Okay.
Why, and the final.
All right.
Yeah, we're just pending clarification of the insurance provision.
So the action item is we need a motion to approve the grant agreement between Caroline County and the Rappahannock Area YMCA. And we also need a motion to approve the ground lease agreement between Caroline County and the Rappahannock Area YMCA, subject to review by the county attorney based on the insurance requirements he has
And revisions.
and revisions. Right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve both the agreement as well as the ground lease.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
For the record, Mr. Underwood, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Popowitz?
Aye.
Mr. Seeley?
Nay.
Mr. Akers?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. So that carries. The board would also like to have on our agenda for discussion at the next meeting the Fred bus funding. To make sure we can clarify that, and as we look at things we're going to do, such as the Y, we need to make sure people can still get there if they have to, especially young folks. All right? Anything else? Motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Popowitz, second by Mr. Akers. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
The nays are outnumbered.
The motion carries unanimously.